Hello, what's going on, everybody out there on YouTube? It is me, Namtox, and I'm here with a brand new format for my reviews. This is the Factual Opinions podcast. It is episode 1, and this is where we are going to talk factually about what's really right in the state of video games, and that's how I'm going to approach it. Now, the format here is going to be a little bit different. For Darksiders Genesis, I wanted to do something special. The good folks at THQ Nordic and Airship Syndicate were gracious enough to give me a review code early, well before release, so I had time to dig in and enjoy myself and not have to rush. So I wanted to do something with a Q&A. I wanted to ask the community of Darksiders fans out there what they wanted to see, what they wanted to know, because if you're anything like me, there's been a lot of talk about this game, and most of the mainstream press are very quick to say that Darksiders Genesis is a Diablo-like. It is a Diablo clone. It is a hack and slash action RPG, which makes you think of loot and legendaries and, 2,000 swords in your inventory at any given moment. But that is not what Darksiders Genesis is. Upon booting this up and playing it, it is far different than a Diablo-style game. Now, also going up today, in addition to this video, I will have a video of local co-op from early on in the game, I think chapter 2, and I'll have another video of online co-op from a little bit later on in the game, chapters 5 or 6, around there. So there's going to be a lot of gameplay of Darksiders Genesis, and I'll be streaming live on twitch.tv/Namtox. I have links for all these things down below, so let's get to the questions portion of this episode. Question 1 comes to us from XDibs. This may be a spoiler, but will the Abyssal Armor be in the game or become paid DLC? I can say without spoiling too much that the tradition of Darksiders titles is here in full force, as there is not only Strife's Abyssal Armor, but War's as well. And then, if it is too spoilery, who is the better one-liners, Strife or Dante? I mean, it's Dante. Strife has some great lines in this game, some ones that actually made me chuckle, but Dante is just a king. But the fact that Strife's in the conversation in game number 1, pretty impressive. Okay, now we have some questions from Bowser Punch, courtesy of Twitter and the Darksiders Discord. Please join that Discord, a lot of cool people there. And he asked me a lot of questions. Now, not every question that everybody asked will be answered, simply because I go over some of this stuff in the review portion of the video. Because after the Q&A, I will be doing a more traditional review and kind of talking about the game, giving you my thoughts on it. But let's start with some of his questions. If I had to rank the Darksiders games, where would Darksiders Genesis fall? And I got this question multiple times. I would rate Darksiders Genesis number 2. So it'd be Darksiders 1, Darksiders Genesis, Darksiders 3, then Darksiders 2. That's my list at the moment. I'm obviously still very into Darksiders, so I'm not at the end point, or it hasn't sat with me, Darksiders 1 has really sat with me, and over time I appreciated it more. So Darksiders Genesis needs a little bit more time to sit in my thoughts, but as of right now, it's my second favorite, easily. If I had to rank the Darksiders soundtrack, where would this one for Genesis fall? That one also number 2. Darksiders 2, number 1, then Genesis, then 1, then 3. That's my soundtrack rating. And now that all the horsemen are all introduced, which one is your favorite? My favorite is still, I would say, Death, with Strife now second place, because the purple just looks incredible. If you look at my channel, purple's a big part of who I am, and I just have to rock with them simply because of color choice. I'm that guy. I also like Donatello simply because he was a purple Ninja Turtle, and I am kind of shallow when it comes to that kind of stuff. But they're all great. I actually love all the horsemen. The second major question he asked, is the creature core system deep enough to feel like it has an impact? Now, this is something I'm going to go over in the review portion, but yes, it does have an impact. And like the other questions here, just animated cutscenes and things like that, these are all things that in the second half of the video, I will go over. I will speak about that. But one thing here I want to talk about, War has a lot of banter in Genesis. Does it still fit him well? Yes, the banter for both characters is actually fantastic, and they don't make War all of a sudden turn into a lighthearted, fun, jokey character just because Strife is there. And Strife isn't all just Deadpool jokes. They balance each other very well, and both horsemen bring out better parts of their characters that you normally wouldn't get to see if it was a solo game. Question number 3 that I'll be answering. Strife is not weaker than War. He can still do a lot of damage, but he is a bit of a glass cannon. With his playstyle focus on dodging and his lack of a block button, you really have to avoid taking a hit. In some ways, it feels like you're playing an actual dual-stick shooter where, you know, you gotta try to manage the battle and you want to try to keep everything centered in the screen and everything clustered together to have an easier time shooting it. So if you do take a clean hit as Strife, it will hurt. You don't get killed in one shot necessarily, but it will hurt. Horse combat is absolutely back. It controls well. Strife is able to shoot while on horseback in addition to melee combat. And not every level lets you ride the horses due to the size of them, but it does feel like this is probably the most amount of horse usage in one of these games. What a weird sentence. I apologize for the diarrhea that came out of my mouth just now. I don't think there is really any plot twist in Genesis that players, especially fans of Darksiders like myself, won't see coming. There is some really cool reveals between the horsemen themselves, as I feel like the game's plot is merely okay, but the character development of Strife and War is actually fantastic. Next up, we have a question from the Color Sakib on Twitter. Do you feel the game is very challenging? I do and I don't. I feel like the game has a level of intensity to it. When you are going back and forth, and when you're first learning how to play the game, you can die. But unlike Darksiders 3, death in this game is not very punishing. Because you have two characters, if one character dies, you seamlessly swap to the other one, and after a certain amount of time, that character is just revived, and you can go back and forth at will. When you're playing in co-op, you have a friend there, they can revive you. Reviving somebody is very quick and easy. So I don't want to say the game is easy. It's not a pushover, and it's not mindless. But it's also not a Dark Souls style like grind. It's not Darksiders 3 where dying is very punishing and you have to backtrack and run around. So it's intense and the combat has a lot of weight to it, but it's not super difficult, even on the hard setting, I'd say. And we have some questions here from Epic Stream Man. Now, unfortunately, I am just a reviewer and I do not have, different versions of the game. I have what they gave me for review. I will say there are things to unlock without needing to pre-order anything. That's as far as I'll go without spoiling anything. And unfortunately, no, there is no crossplay, and I do not know about the state of crossplay in the future. Honestly, Stadia is such a new platform that a game on the level of Darksiders, not that it couldn't do it, but this is not the kind of game that's going to be the bridge to unite Stadia and Steam in crossplay. Next up is a question from Abby is Player 1 from Twitter. How is the keyboard and mouse support? Is it optimized? If not, how bad it is, since I will play on keyboard and mouse. Now, as soon as the game boots up, it immediately recommends that you play on a gamepad. Now, I have had to play on a keyboard and mouse at times because there are some bugs in the pre-release version of the game that has since been patched out, so you guys won't have to worry about it. But I had to use keyboard and mouse for certain sections because the controller was acting up. And it played fine. I feel like, especially for Strife. Strife feels like he's more balanced toward using a keyboard and mouse simply because he works on a dual-stick shooter-style rhythm, so the aiming with the mouse can help with that. And his melee combos are good, but they're not as in-depth as Wars is. So I feel like if you're going to be using a keyboard and mouse, stick to playing a Strife and you'll be alright. Next up, we have a question from Bert on Reset Era. Shout out to Reset Era. And one of his questions are, how differentiated are the different core setups? Do you feel like you're making meaningful decisions for your playstyle, or just generally getting stronger as you slot more cores? Now, it's just like I answered earlier with Bowser. The thing about the creature cores is, I'll get into some of it in the review, but one thing I'll say up front is, it's not the same as if you're getting loot in a standard RPG. It's not like you're getting better guns that have plus 25 attack, plus 30 attack, plus 30 attack, plus 5 poison damage. The creature cores, not only do they have stats that carry with them, but they also sometimes just have modifiers to gameplay. Like, oh, this special attack is going to do more damage, but you'll have less experience gained as a result, or this move will now have additional properties, or this ability will now spawn double the amount of things on the screen. So the creature cores are more about building a playstyle rather than seeing numbers go up. Now, there are some numbers that do go up, but that's not what it's about. It's more about configuring the way you play and the way you prefer to play. That's kind of what the creature core system is there for. And as for ranking the Darksiders games, I've already done that, but thank you for asking. With that being said, it is time to get into my actual review of Darksiders Genesis. Now, this will be as spoiler-free as possible, and I just want to be completely upfront here. Even though I've had time with the game, I have not fully finished it. I am near the end. I have about 3 stages left to go, but I just had a lot of things going on, and I've been replaying large chunks of the game due to the level-based structure, which allows you to just go back, play on a harder setting. The levels tell you how many secrets you found, and this game just has that addictive quality of like, ooh, but if we just go back one more time, we have this new ability, we can do all these secrets. So I have not completed it as of this recording, but unless the game takes a hilariously huge face dive off a cliff in the last 10%, I think my review will still stand. But questions relating to New Game Plus or unlockable bonuses, I cannot answer, so please understand that going in. I apologize for that. If that's what you're here for, this will not have that. Now let's look forward to the review and what I have to say. And some of this stuff are things I said when I played Darksiders 3, and I just want to kind of reiterate this opening to let people know where I'm coming from with Darksiders. So back when Darksiders 1 came out, I still remember the release date being crazy. It was January, and back then, especially in the 360 era, when B games were running amok, January was the dumping ground. You know, January was where the games went to die. If you had a game come out in January, you were immediately expecting to pick it up at Blockbuster Video or Hollywood Video, thank you very much, because you just weren't really expecting it to be some grand special title. But I still remember playing Darksiders, which was a game I rented because I thought, oh man, this looks neat, but I never heard of this studio, I never heard of this franchise. It just has a really cool looking guy and the name of it is badass. I mean, that cover art really helped sell it. You know, Joe Mad, the lead creator and artist, I was like, wow, this is just very striking. And you know, my friends were fans of his comics and they said, oh man, this game's going to be something special. So I gave it a shot, and then I was blown away. All the stereotypes about January video games were just poof, evaporated, gone. I was like playing a classic, and I had to tell people, I'm like, yo, I don't know if anyone knows, but this game is so good. Like, this is dark, gritty Legend of Zelda. All you people crying about Wind Waker need to be playing Darksiders. Here's your gritty adult Zelda game that you're all whining about. It's right here. It's right here in front of your very eyes. The thing is about Darksiders is I remember when the game was originally coming out, people said it was God of War. God of War, because you're playing a big, tough, angry guy with a big sword. You're Kratos. You know, you're going to be just quick time eventing all the enemies and punching your head off. But then I played that game and I'm like, no, this is Legend of Zelda. We have dungeons. We have crafted experiences here. You are not just mindlessly mashing two buttons over and over again for the vast majority of the game. And it did share some things like the executions, but the storyline, the plot, War as a character, despite his, one-note kind of stoic nature, he had a lot of depth to him, and some of the relationships he had with Volgrim and Samael were really interesting, and it was super captivating. Like the gameplay loop, I was just engrossed in the world. I thought the setting was really cool, seeing the desolate buildings and the ruins of mankind. I just thought it was everything I wanted that I didn't know I wanted. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't asking for Darksiders, but Darksiders happened, and I'm really appreciating that it did. A little after that, in 2012, Darksiders 2 would go on to release, and I remember I was so excited for Darksiders 2. I was looking at every preview I could. I was like, oh man, Death looks rad. He has scythes. Like, I love, outside of spears, sickles and scythes are my favorite melee weapons. So I was like, oh, look at his combo system. Like, he has some really sick stuff. But then the game came out, and I was honestly a bit disappointed in Darksiders 2. Now, visually it looked fantastic, Death was a great character, the storyline was everything I wanted, despite it not taking place after Darksiders 1, where all the horsemen land. Spoilers for Darksiders 2, by the way. But the loot-based structure of the game really took a lot out of me. Every time I was exploring the world, and I'd see a cool place and go to a dungeon and do some really satisfying platforming and action sequences, and then get to the end and have a big combat arena fight, open a chest, and here comes some common gloves that were much worse than what I already had on. Or you get to the end of this huge combat arena, and the item I got out of it was worse than the stuff I was getting from regular enemies just roaming the open world. That really kind of felt like it took away from the positives in Darksiders 2, and it just kept killing my momentum. I felt like some of the magic was lost by trying to incorporate a Diablo-style loot system. I know some people love that, and normally I do as well, but it just didn't click with me for some reason. I couldn't vibe with how Darksiders 2 was throwing that element in there. And then after that, the THQ company who had developed these games, along with BeatChill, the studio who developed them, they went bankrupt. And it looked like we were not going to be getting any more Darksiders ever. Since I've been playing video games, which has been since the 80s, every time companies fold or IPs get lost, you almost never see them come back. I mean, you can look at EA as a perfect example of what usually happens when a company's gone. It's usually gone for good. But then, through the magic of the modern world, Nordic came around, bought the rights to THQ, reacquired the right studios, Gunfire Games was formed, Airship Syndicate was formed, the rights to Darksiders was brought in, and now we've had Darksiders 3, Darksiders Genesis, and it's crazy that this has even happened. So, with that being said, we'll now take our efforts into Darksiders Genesis. Now, you've heard what I thought about the previous games, and I love Darksiders 3, by the way. I'll get into that a little bit later. But that's kind of my history with the franchise. That's where I come in at with Darksiders. Darksiders Genesis is finally letting Strife take the reins, pun intended. Once again, this is another prequel, and unlike the first three games, Genesis is more of a pure prequel. It's not really jumping halfway through the game to take place alongside the original. This really is a prequel. It sets up the world as we know it in the Darksiders games to follow, especially Part 1. The first thing that's going to stick out to every single person playing is the perspective. Darksiders games, while all different, have all shared the third-person camera. Genesis opts for the isometric perspective that will undoubtedly draw comparisons to games such as Diablo. I can see this shift in perspective putting off some returning veterans. On top of the huge shift in camera is the fact that the game is a budget price and features co-op for the first time. Now, these things kind of made me hesitant when I was looking at Darksiders Genesis. I'm not going to say they made me dislike it, but my expectations were lowered if I'm being totally honest, especially because I was wondering to myself, what style of games would Genesis take after? Darksiders was highly influenced by The Legend of Zelda, Part 2 had a very Diablo influence and was sprawling in its scope, and Darksiders 3 is also influenced by another classic, but not Zelda. Super Metroid and Dark Souls are what that game drew most of its inspiration from. Darksiders Genesis pays tribute to a combination of games I would never have guessed: Tomb Raider and the Guardian of Light, and the original Darksiders itself. Much of the design resembles the original in terms of balance. The massive multi-realm adventures of previous games are stripped down to a much tighter and more cohesive level-based structure. Now initially, the thought of a level-based design made me worry that Genesis would lose some of the scope and grandeur of the previous games. But even in the very beginning of this game, you will see many pathways and locations that you just don't have the ability to traverse at the moment. Instead of these huge dungeons to gain new abilities, you'll have to explore, solve puzzles, and work in tandem as you control Strife and War to navigate each level. Now some of these levels are massive and they sprawl out with multiple sub-stages and secrets everywhere. Some of the other stages are very traditional combat arenas, and you will have boss fights where the entire stage is, hey, load in, you and this huge boss are just going to square off and have a huge battle. The levels also do a great job of showing you secrets that you can't quite read at the moment, and the map is a little bit difficult to read, but using it you can see exactly where and how many secrets you still need to find. The thing that's great about this is because games that work in a level-based structure kind of don't have that aspect of exploration and backtracking that you'd get in a game like Castlevania Symphony of the Night or a traditional Darksiders title. You know, something that has a continuous open world. That style of game naturally lent itself to backtracking and naturally coming back on your old pathways to explore. And when I heard the game was level-based, that's kind of one of the reasons why I got hesitant, because usually when you have a game that's level-based, you run through the level one time, and unless you're chasing a high score or two, there's really not much reason to come back and replay it outside of the novelty of just doing so. But here, they do a good job of making it feel like a Darksiders game, despite the fact that you're choosing set stages one after the other. And kind of the big deal to talk about is the game received a ton of Diablo comparisons, like I mentioned earlier during the Q&A. But Genesis is not a Diablo style game in any way, shape, or form. The game has no random loot. You won't be waiting for an epic legendary piece of gloves or plus 30 guns to help you get that next bit of dopamine in your system. Upgrades and abilities are acquired much like the original game, through adventuring, solving various puzzles, and finding secrets, health stones, wrath stones. If it was in one of the other Darksiders games, it's here as well, just in isometric form. One major thing that is different than the original games, however, are the tool sets for each character is a little bit limited compared to the cast of the main trilogy. However, that's fine because you play as Strife and War together, which is another thing I really didn't see too much of pre-release. These characters are not palette swaps or alternate models whatsoever. They are completely unique, and the combat and character progression with each of those characters is separate. The combat and character progression also see a handful of changes. While responsive and smooth as it has always been, the ebb and flow of combat is very different. It can be easy to see surface level comparisons to other top-down hack and slash games, but this isn't some mindless just button mash combat. For one, each of our two horsemen play completely differently. Strife uses his trusty pistols and knives. He is the quintessential glass cannon. His basic controls resemble many dual-stick shooters you all know and love, but he is completely capable of getting in there and using melee attacks as well. In fact, knowing when to dive in and manage his ammo types are all a huge part of his gameplay. War, on the other hand, plays almost exactly like you remember if you played the original Darksiders. His combo strings, special attacks, even his exploration abilities share a lot in common with the previous game. The high-level gameplay comes in the form of managing your wrath, which is how you use your abilities, and knowing how to either use your invincibility frames of Strife on his dodge, or when to block and parry with War. Most of the game is not too tough on the standard difficulty, but both characters, especially Strife, are frail. A couple of really good hits and you can and will be killed. In co-op, this part of the game is handled differently than when you're playing alone. In co-op, your partner must come over and revive you. In solo play, you'll automatically switch to the other horseman, and after a short cooldown, the dead character will be revived and you can go back to swapping back and forth as you please. It's a nice way to have a challenge, and like I said earlier during the Q&A, while the game isn't super tough or punishing, it is intense and thrilling. The game also controls incredibly well. All the attacks, gunshots, and dodges are pulled off with finesse and really responsive controls. The upgrade system is probably where this game, outside of the isometric perspective, really separates itself from the trilogy. Upgrades are present in the form of a thing called creature cores. Now, Genesis features a unified upgrade path that resembles a sphere grid more than a skill tree. Both characters share in this skill tree, and many other creature cores will have abilities that affect both characters, such as War's block will take more damage, but Strife's dodge has more invincibility frames. Things of that nature. Each horseman has 3 core stats: health, wrath, and attack. When you kill a creature, they have a chance of dropping their core. Each enemy in the game, from lowly minions to the huge bosses, has their own unique core that can drop. These cores are all based in one of the 3 stats. The grid will have nodes. Slot a core into a node, then it becomes active and adjacent nodes can be used. If you use a sword creature core on a sword node, whatever stat that creature core gives you is amplified. If you fill out the grid, you can use whatever creature cores benefit you in your playstyle. Each creature core can also be leveled up 3 times, and once you max out a creature core, getting duplicate ones will automatically convert them to currency used in the various shops. Now, these cores range greatly in what they can do. Some cores just offer the standard percentage buff of a stat, while others can add things such as increased invincibility frames, or a larger window for perfect parries, or maybe make some special attacks have brand new properties. This style of upgrade system is a huge refresher. Instead of pausing every 2 seconds to micromanage the 40 blue swords you picked up, the creature core system allows for true freedom for different builds and variety that fit your playstyle without drowning you in useless junk. It's a smart, refreshing way to manage upgrades, and at any time you can freely tinker with the whole skill tree without needing to buy a skill reset of any kind. And as for the various shops I mentioned earlier, like I said, no spoilers, but a familiar face is around to provide a handful of enhancements for you guys. The storytelling in Genesis is where the modest price and the budget is most keenly felt. The story is told either through portraits or motion comics that usually bookend each major stage. Now, don't get me wrong, the story is told very well and the voice actors all portray their roles with perfection. The storyline itself is decent. It's a good primer for how things are the way they are in the original Darksiders game and the games that followed. The highlight for myself, however, is the relationship between Strife and War and how their character develops over the course of it. Strife may come across as Deadpool in most of the marketing, but his brashness and his attitude give way to moments of some painful memories. The quiet moments of dialogue where that attitude peels back just long enough to tease something underneath was more of a motivation to keep pushing the story forward than the plot itself. War also does a great job. The normally stoic and quietly angry horseman actually has somebody to speak with who he isn't trying to kill or loathing at all times. The back and forth gives him more nuance as Strife consistently pokes and jabs at how grim and serious War is all the time. This truly allows us to see these horsemen, this sworn family, in a light that we've only caught short glimpses of in the previous games. These small moments are now the things I didn't truly realize I wanted in that inevitable Darksiders game that picks up after that infamous cliffhanger. I can't wait to have all 4 of the horsemen riding together, bantering, and just engaging with each other to see and learn more about them and how they interact as a group. I'd also be a fool not to mention some other details and notes that I've written down. The game looks gorgeous. As you can see in this footage, War and Strife are clear on the screen, and despite the isometric camera, the animations and various moves all carry a lot of impact and weight. Small details like the horse's flaming tracks or the massive amount of unique execution finishers just bring the game to life. The score is also incredible. Where 3 went for a more sparse soundscape, Genesis is right up front with a great and bombastic soundtrack. It has original music, but also features some great variations on themes from the previous titles. Each level is accompanied by its own music, and it was great for getting me pumped up during some of the more big moments in the game. But not everything is perfect, and Genesis does have some flaws. Because the game features so much freedom to explore and it has very versatile movement, more than a couple of times during co-op sessions, my partner or I would find ourselves stuck in the world. The isometric angle can also make certain platforming sections, especially going for secrets, a bit more difficult than they should be, because lining up the angles and how high or low you are can be a bit challenging. Now, if you combine that with the fact that making the wrong jump might get you stuck in the environment without a way to get out, it can be a bit frustrating. The game doesn't have a unstick or, quick restart checkpoint thing, so we were able to get around it sometimes by having him quit out and then rejoin, but that's a bit frustrating, especially when you're having such a good time. Little moments like that can really, just that little bit of frustration, like I just want to, man, if there is just a different way to get around getting stuck. But I feel like if they got rid of the ability to get stuck, that means they would have to sacrifice on a lot of the platforming and the exploration, and I wouldn't take that trade, because those are some of my favorite parts of this game and Darksiders as a series. The combat, as you can see in my footage here, also can get pretty busy. Between souls, health orbs, wrathing creature cores, and other collectibles, the screen can sometimes explode with a ton of things happening during the big fights. This game always does a great job of highlighting you, but in co-op, pray for the war players out there. It isn't uncommon for Strife to fill the screen, which can make blocking and pairing with him that much more difficult. In solo play, it's a lot more manageable, as it wasn't a problem for me, and I just wanted to point this out because it will affect some players, and I know that some people are going to want a nice clean screen so they can see everything happening. Overall though, I've been loving all of my time spent in Darksiders Genesis. It has a ton of depth, the campaign is lengthy and has great character development, the game has a superb blend of action, platforming, and exploration, and all of those things are hallmarks of the series, and this one stands out. Even better is the fantastic co-op, because you can do it local with split screen or online, and being able to play the whole game front to back with a friend is awesome. Some of my co-op partners have never played a Darksiders game before. They've only heard of it through me rambling and ranting and raving about how great they are. This has been the perfect way to bring them into the fold, and Genesis does a great job of being an introduction into this fantastic universe. It's easily one of my favorite games of this year. Now, if I had to give it a score, which I do because I write for RectifyGaming.com, which is where you can read the written review, this is a 9.2 out of 10 for me. Outside of Remnant, which is also developed by Gunfire Games, who shares in the lineage of Vigil and the Darksiders series, it's one of my most fun games I've played all year. The co-op has been excellent, and like I said, despite those issues with getting stuck a handful of times, some of those happened because I was playing a very early pre-release build, and most of those issues were patched out, but I'm sure some people will come across of it. So I hope that those don't crop up too much when the game is released. So if it is a problem, I'll come back and talk about it. But the issues I had were never enough to make me go like, you know what? I'm done playing, turn it off. No, the game was so much fun. It had such a great momentum, and every level was just a joy to explore. So I never had that moment of being like, yuck, like I got stuck, let me stop it. And I don't want to make it seem like it happens every single level, every time you do a jump. It has not happened that often. It just, when it happens, because the game is so well polished and made, it just kind of takes you out of it for a brief moment. Other things I want to say about this game, I think, that don't fit the traditional review format, are just the fun I have playing it. You know, you don't really hear reviewers talk about fun. This isn't GamePro or EGM like back in the day, but it's just fun to play. You know, games, especially in 2019, feel like work a lot of the times. On top of that, I review games as a job, so it doubles down like feeling like work. So when I turn on a video game and I see, hey, there's 10 daily challenges and 3 weeklies and 4 monthlies, and it starts to feel like a list of chores, and you're getting hit with all these objectives, you're getting hit with microtransactions and terrible pay-to-win schemes. It just kind of, you know, it kind of makes you go a little nuts, and then you hop into Darksiders, and it's like free from all of that microtransaction-filled garbage. There's no dailies, there's no annoying pop-up telling you, hey, play the game this way all the time. And just like the previous Darksiders games with Vigil, Airship Syndicate and Gunfire Games, they're really smart with their game design. Their game design, little things such as the creature cores, for example. You always know how to get them. There's always a way to grab them, but they put a limit on it. You could only upgrade them so much. And hey, you know what? When you hit that limit, instead of letting you pick them up and fill up your screen, they just turn into currency. Nice and easy, nice and simple, a nice elegant solution that makes the creature cores fun to engage with, and not a huge slog or a list that you're just, oh my god, let me see, what creatures do I have here? I have 35 of the same one. No, it's very clean, it's elegant, it's streamlined, and it's all very well designed. That's the kind of thing that Darksiders does. They take some of these great games that we've played for years, and they just refine the rough edges. You know, they kind of round them off, and they bring their own style and flair, and they understand what makes action work well, which is normally a thing you'd normally get out of a Japanese developer. And that is great animation, impact, weight. Even though the game's isometric, I'm still doing 3 or 4 hits, kicking a guy into the air, following him up, slamming him down, execution, and it just feels satisfying. Even though I've killed and executed some of these enemies 10, 15, 100 times by the time I'm going to get through this game, it still feels fun, it's fast, it's snappy, they don't weigh it down, and I just love playing it. I really feel like it's a testament to them, their design team, everyone working together as a whole, from the art to the music and the incredible score and just a tight, really responsive gameplay. And also it runs great on PC. There's a lot of options to customize the entire HUD. You can remove everything, show certain things in combat. Lots of little details like that are everywhere, and the way the game unfolds, the way each level slowly peels back and reveals another aspect of the gameplay, or another unlockable, or hey, here's another gameplay system for you to engage with. It's very satisfying. The cadence at which things are delivered to you right as you're getting accustomed to one way of doing things, or one form of combat, or you get one upgrade and you're like, oh, this is it, man. I got this lightning gun. I am not gonna stop. You get redacted and you're like, oh, never using that thing again. I'm moving on to the new stuff. But they always find a way for you to go back, and it's all based on your playstyle and your preference, and it's quick, fast, snappy. Not that it's, you know, like popcorn, but it's also not asking you to become a, you know, regimented 9 to 5, clock into the video game to do your daily list of boring jobs and clock out so you can wait till the next day at reset and do it all over again. So I just really enjoy that about the Darksiders series, and because of what I saw pre-release, I didn't think that Genesis would have that. But not only does it have that, it has it in spades, and it has it with polish, and by making an excellent Darksiders game. Like I said, it's easily one of my favorite games of the year. A 9.2. Is that what I said earlier, 9.2? I think it's a 9.2. I should really write this number down. But a 9.2 out of 10, I feel like it's absolutely worth the money. If you are a fan of Darksiders, this is an absolute no-brainer decision. Buy the game, bring on the Fury and Death DLC campaign, bring on the inevitable next-gen Darksiders where we can play as all 4 of them together. I just want to take part in the cinematic Darksiders universe, the DCU, and I'm not talking about Batman here. I'm talking about War, Strife, Fury, and Death. I hope everyone enjoyed this brand new format for my reviews. This is how I'm going to do it going forward. If I get a game early enough, I'll try to do a Q&A and answer some of the questions that I know fans have that some of the bigger sites kind of gloss over. And then I'll have the more impactful discussion about the game itself. I hope you enjoyed the footage that was playing. I thank you everybody who's engaged me in the Discord, on Reddit, Reset Era. The Darksiders community is one of my favorite communities. I'm glad to be a part of it. I'm glad to bring this review to you. And like I said, I have other videos going up. I will be streaming as you hear this. So please subscribe. It helps me out a lot. I'm going to be putting these episodes out in podcast format soon across all your favorite devices. So stay tuned right here. This is Factual Opinions, episode 1, and I'm glad all of you were here to be a part of it with me. I am Namtox. I appreciate all of you. Have a good night, everybody. Later.